first, what was your first impression when you arrived at the Sahara refugee camps?
Here at the camp, I have been greeted incredibly well with all the extremely heartwarming hospitality from the people, and it was, of course, the trip here was very, very long from Stockholm. It took like a week, but it was a very, very beautiful route, and I got to travel through the desert and meet many, many inspiring people on the way, and have now gotten the chance to learn much more about the occupation, about life here in the refugee camps, how people have developed an extreme resilience during the last 50 years when people have been denied the right to return to their homelands and denied their right to self-determination. And it's very, very outrageous to hear all these stories and then to realize how silent the international community has been and how much the international institutions have failed, that people, the Saharaui people, have been peacefully awaiting a fair referendum for decades and have gotten nothing, and the world has been silent. And of course, with silence comes complicity. When the world turns a blind eye and ignores the suffering and the struggles of the Saharaui people of Western Sahara, they're also further deepening this crisis and are complicit in this suffering.
What inspired you to visit the Sahara refugee camp?
What inspired me is I got the invitation to come here, and first I thought that it was not going to be possible, but then it was possible, and I'm very glad for that. It has been very, very incredibly educational, and I have for a long time wanted to learn more about the Saharaui struggle and how the world can join their echoes and calls for a liberated Western Sahara. So I'm incredibly grateful to have been here and to have spent the last days, have been talking to so many people and learned so much.
How did visiting the Sahara impact your understanding of the challenge in facing the Sahara people?
Yeah, the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara is something that the media and the world is completely silent about. The colonialism and the extreme repression and oppression that are people's everyday life is something that people like me never get to hear about. When the media reports about this region, they don't mention the occupation, they don't mention the Saharaui people. And that silence needs to come to an end, because that silence is what enables this extreme violence and the failure of the international institutions. The continuous failures of them to ensure accountability is what is giving occupational powers like Morocco the impunity and the legitimization of continuing this occupation and continuing extracting and plundering natural resources and suffocating the Saharaui people who have the right to self-determination, the right to freedom and the right to dignity, but are being violently denied those rights, and the world remains silent about it.
Mm-hmm. How do you think the occupation of Western Sahara connect to the climate crisis?
Yeah. The occupation of Western Sahara is connected to the climate crisis in many, many ways. First, it's the easy connection that Western Sahara is among the places in the world that are mostly affected by the climate crisis, with more extreme weather events and the insufferable heat, flooding, and so on. The people who are most marginalized become most vulnerable in the face of the climate crisis. Also, the Saharaui people are among the people who have done the absolute least to cause this crisis. And yet, despite this, they have no seat at the table, and their voices are not being listened to when we are discussing the climate crisis. And then, of course, the over-extraction and exploitation and plundering of natural resources, in this case, as in pretty much every other case goes hand in hand with occupation and oppression of people, where we can see that nature is being destroyed and exploited, people are also being exploited. But of course, the reason why I am a climate justice activist is not just because I care about nature, it's because I want justice and liberation for everyone, because of course no one is free until everyone is free. And if we are claiming to be climate justice activists fighting for people's human rights, because of course the climate crisis is a human rights crisis, if we claim to be activists for justice but are not including the liberation of Western Sahara and justice and freedom for the Sahrawi people, we cannot claim to be fighting for justice, because liberation means liberation for everyone, including Western Sahara.
How can we hold company and government who are complicit in the illegal exploitation of Western Sahara resources responsible for those?
Of course, Morocco is not able to maintain this occupation and this violence by themselves. It is by weapons and trade deals from other countries all over the world, which means that we are all more or less complicit in what is happening, and we all have a responsibility. The extraction and exploitation of Western Saharan natural resources like phosphorus, fishery, etc. is something that the entire world is sort of benefiting from. So we must hold the companies and the people in power who enable this colonialism to continue accountable. And we must also hold the international institutions that enable Morocco to try to claim themselves to be leaders in the green transition, when what they are actually doing is green colonialism. They're using occupied territories without the consent of the Sahrawi people to exploit those lands and claiming that it is for a so-called green transition. And we must never fall for these lies, because of course a green transition cannot happen at the expense of people.
After your visit, do you feel the climate justice movement should pay more attention to the Sahrawi struggle?
Yes, the climate justice movement and every movement that claimed to be fighting for justice, equality, has to talk about the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara and the repression and oppression that the Sahrawi people have had to endure for decades. Because otherwise we are leaving the Sahrawi people behind, and that is absolutely unacceptable. And I am ashamed and outraged that so far the world has been so silent on this topic, that people are so unaware and are scared to speak out.
How do you think what can be done to better support the Sahrawi?
If we have a possibility to speak up, if we have the possibility to take action, we must use every opportunity that we can to highlight this occupation and to call for a liberated Western Sahara. If we have resources and platforms, we must center Sahrawi voices and include them in the perspectives when we are talking about justice, whether it is climate justice, women equality, or anything.
You met a lot of young people during your visit. What stood out to you about their passion, about the challenge they face?
What stood out for me from especially all the young people that I've met here is the never-ending resistance, and the fact that people are still continuing to fight, even though they are being stolen their basic human rights and are being denied their basic human rights. They are still fighting and still struggling to see a free Western Sahara and to ensure their human rights in every way that they can.
What do you think an organization like the UN should do to address the issue of Western Sahara, and including the environmental climate change in Western Sahara?
It is so painfully obvious that institutions like the UN have absolutely failed and are continuing every day to betray the Saharaui people by not ensuring accountability for those who are responsible for these human rights abuses. And as well as international law has been proven to mean nothing in contexts like these, when the perpetrators still have impunity for their extreme war crimes and ecocides, genocides, and in cases like this, when talks of human rights by these kinds of institutions seem to only serve as a distraction from the actual crimes that are being committed in countries' backyards, but also that they are complicit in the ecocides and genocides and human rights abuses all over the world by financing and legitimizing them, and by not raising their voices to end the suffering.
Do you see yourself focusing more on issue like Western Sahara in the future?
I'm really hoping to be able to do more and to do what I can from my, of course, limited opportunities. But I really hope that I'll be able to do more with the Saharaui people, focusing on issues like the liberation of Western Sahara, in connection to the climate crisis, but also human rights issues.
Mm-hmm. To the people who have never been to the camps, what would you say to them?
Mm-hmm. To the people who have not been to the camps, I mean, you don't need to travel to the camps to have a basic sense of humanity and to realize that everyone deserves dignity, everyone deserves freedom, justice, and safety, and that wherever this is happening all over the world, where people are denied those basic rights, is something that we must do everything in our power to try to prevent and to stop from happening.